Okay, actually, maybe I'll start sharing my screen or should I wait?
Yeah, in a couple seconds. I'll let you know.
Sounds great.
Cool. So we're recording. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm looking at the number of attendees. We're at 156 so far. This is definitely shaping up to be one of the biggest sessions we've had. I'm seeing people from Australia, India, New Zealand, London, all attending this in various hours of the night. So this is amazing. Glad you guys are showing the initiative and supporting this kind of program. Today, we're going to have a special guest with us, Susan. She is a principal data scientist at Clearbank. And when I look at her LinkedIn and her content, it's just so diverse and also so impressive that I absolutely had to have her join us because there's just so much to learn from how she not only does what she does, but manages all of it, right? I think it's very difficult to do and easier said than done. So we're really looking forward to hearing kind of her share her journey and provide some tips to all of us. If you are new to these sessions, which I'm sure some of you are, my name is Madhav. I am a senior data scientist at Disney, and I had got bit by the education bug, and I've been really like trying to pursue this kind of initiative to help out aspiring data scientists. And these Q&A sessions is one of those kind of initiatives, and I'm glad you guys are taking advantage of it. And I hope you enjoy this session. With that, I'll hand it off to Susan, where she'll share a screen and present kind of her career journey and tips.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Madhav.
Of course.
S Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. I'm just pulling up. Hopefully, if there's anything on chat, let me know.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll do.
Sounds great. So, yeah, my name's Susan, and thank you very much for the introduction. I'm currently a principal data scientist at Clearbank. I'm going to talk about like how my entire journey was from, I guess, my education and my first role and some other side things that I did along the way. I'm going to go into all of that, and hopefully that can help inform a little bit about just like how I got into the data science career, what I've seen in data science, because I know that the road to data science is actually very mysterious. Like I felt that too when I was first starting. I had no idea what data science was, and then when I did know what it was, I was just really confused as to how to enter. So I'll get started here. So first of all, a little bit about me. Uh, so following Madhav's slide template, and then had some interesting questions. So it was like, where are you based in, and where were you born? So actually, I was born in Taiwan. I lived there for 10 years or so, but it's not in a very I lived there 10 years and then I came to Canada for 10 years. It was like I was born there. My parents came to Canada for a few years and then moved back to Taiwan for a few years, and then I moved back here. So it's kind of like back and forth type of situation, which is, I guess, slightly different from what I usually see. And I've written about some of that on my blog as well, but I'll share a bit more about that. Right now, I am in Toronto, Canada, where I've been for the last quite a few years. I was in Waterloo, Canada before, so they're both in Ontario for those in the states. Actually, I don't know if that helps necessarily, but somewhere in Canada, in slightly to the east. Um, yeah, and my interests are video games, both playing them as well as developing them. I have a wild Steam video game collection, which I started in university. It's pretty massive, like a few thousand games, and I also developed them too because uh, it's pretty fun to do that. And I'll share more about how that helped me learn programming. It was actually a core way that I got into data science as well. I also enjoy writing and speaking at events like this. I have my own blog, which is susanshu.com, and I write every week. So there was also this question on the slides, which is, what are your favorite data science topics? Actually, the original one was data science topic, but there's too many, so I can't choose. I just had to put three of them. So reinforcement learning, recommender systems, as well as ML ops, which is like the operations portion, ensuring everything's in production in a pretty, I guess, nifty, nice way. I'll also talk more about that because there's a lot of details in this journey that I want to share with you. So, just to start off, I did middle school and high school in Taiwan, actually. And then I came back to Canada to do my bachelor's in economics. So, both my degrees, my bachelor's at U Waterloo as well as my master's degree at University of Toronto, were in economics. So, it's slightly a roundabout way of entering data science. I actually worked full time since 2018 because I was doing the master's, the latter part of the master's as a part time student. And my work experience has been, first of all, at Bell Canada. So I guess for those in the States and uh, for those outside of North America, it's a telecom. And for those in the States, you might recognize the name because of AT&T and T and how they were formerly, I guess, very long time ago related. And then there was a Bell Canada division, and there was a Bell in US as well. But then it was spun off, and I think it's related to what is now AT&T. So at Bell Canada, I deployed recommender systems as well as reinforcement learning projects. I guess for the recommender systems project, I contributed much more heavily to it and worked on it for quite a long time during my time there. I also am the founder and a developer of the video game studio Quill Game Studios, and I actually shipped my first game. So I was the basically the only developer, the only writer, the only PM because I had to do all of that. And then I hired artists, and I think I hired an editor. And for my first game, I basically did everything apart from art, music, and I just hired someone to play test and proofread the game. And it's actually made like a reasonable amount of money. Like I've sold like 5,000, 6,000 copies, which is pretty good for a one person studio like with their first game. So I'm fairly happy with that. It was launched on consoles as well as Steam on PC. So the consoles are like Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. And actually, for a very short period of time, I was a contract developer for a ML startup, which actually, oh, sorry about that.
You're fine.
So it actually involved like using Node and some other parts of more like front end, back end, like full stack kind of situation because it was, I think there were like 3, 4 people. Yeah, like 4 people. So then it was very end to end, and that gave me a really interesting experience because I think usually in data science that kind of full stack experience is not necessarily required, but
Mhm.
I did find it helpful even though it was very random. It was just like I think they definitely said it was a full stack position, and then I was a data scientist, and then I was like, yeah, I'll just say yes, and then I just said yes, and I did it. So it was a kind of interesting situation there. So, but that was after I had already started doing data science. So I guess that's
Fair
less of
enough.
a yeah, less of a contribution to the data science journey initially, and then I joined Clearbank as a senior data scientist in late 2020. Well, actually July, so the latter half technically. And then now I'm a principal data scientist there. And
I
this
wanna
is my timeline. Hmm.
Yeah, I want to ask one question. So, recommender systems, reinforcement learning, it's a really exciting and sexy aspect of data science, right? But it's almost like abstract and people don't know how to get into a role where they can work on those types of projects. Is that something you focused on in your masters, or did you kind of work on a large slew of things and it just so happened that the projects at Bell Canada were in that space?
Ooh, yeah. So I didn't specifically focus on it initially. When I first joined, I was doing some work in churn modeling, which is more, I guess,
Yeah, of
typical of, let's say, banking or
course.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, and telecom. And then I had, okay, I'm trying to like go back in time and see how exactly it started. Um, I think there were maybe two factors. I think one of them being that for someone that had first started, I was quite experienced in both Git and Python, actually, thanks to my game development experience. So I
Cool.
did that on the side as a student when I was studying my master's. Right, I was working on the game. So actually, I learned Git and Python both quite well when I joined. And then when I joined, there was a project with I guess it was one of the more visible projects in a sense because it was customer facing, right? Because the results do end up going to the customers do see it. So just to take a quick step back, the recommender system is um, it's like when you go on YouTube or when you go on
Yeah.
Spotify, right? And based on what you have interacted with, then they will suggest you different things based on what could be suitable for you based on your past behavior. So, for me to join that kind of project, like the first thing was that actually I was pretty experienced in those things. So I think they're more confident that I was able to pick it up and
Cool.
deliver it. And the second part was actually something that I will um, mention also in a bit, which is the machine learning meetups organization, and then now it's turned into online live streaming as well. So they knew that I had some more technical and theoretical know-how in machine learning, but that was not from my formal education, but rather from this group. Now it's called Aggregate Intellect, which you can actually find on YouTube, and it has around 13,000 subscribers. But it started out as an in-person meetup based in Toronto. So that was, I think, in 2018. I joined that, and eventually I became a co-organizer, and then that really really helped me. But at the same time, I was it's like reading a scientific paper at least one a week. So that really added up, and I was able to
Mhm.
contribute a lot to both these projects and was able to be, I guess, trusted to be put on those projects. But I'm also very grateful that I had been trusted with these projects and was able to deliver on them too.
Cool.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful. I'll definitely elaborate more on that, and people can ask any follow up questions that they would like. Um, yeah, so I will quickly continue a bit. Yeah, this is what I mentioned. So it's the YouTube channel called Aggregate Intellect Machine Learning Papers Explained. And then it started out as an in person meetup. And it's like a paper. It started out as like a paper journal club where every week we would meet up somewhere in Toronto and then go through a machine learning paper in very, very high level of detail. Like we would just like go through all the math and stuff like that. And I did this outside of work. So I mean, I guess it was a kind of a keener behavior. And yeah, I also do my writing on susanshu.com right now. So it has not been a long time, to be honest. It's been 3, 4 years since I graduated, even. So graduated from undergrad, actually. So I guess because actually before I didn't really put down the dates, and then Madhav was like, "Hey, you can, put down
Yeah.
some of the dates just to see how the timeline was." And now to go a little bit into the projects, and I have the work projects, which I mentioned is the website and a recommender system, which was able to be served to millions of customers. So I'm grateful that at my previous role in, I guess, large telecom, there was a lot of data that's available, and I got a lot of opportunities to work with very, very large scale of data that sometimes some other types of companies might not have the luxury of working with. Um, and the second one, which I guess I don't want to go into extreme amount of detail because, yeah, I guess because I have since moved on from the company, but it's in reinforcement learning, and there's, I guess, like internal kind of support. There's people who do support, right?
Hmm.
When you engage with like a telecom's like support, like either through calling, or I guess examples of support include calling as well as like website Q&A and stuff like that. But just keeping it vague there. But like based on the interactions with the support, the reinforcement learning will uh, keep improving its behavior.
Yep.
and learned what behaviors to suggest in order to retain customers. Yeah, so that was another project that I worked on. And yeah, like I mentioned briefly before, at the very beginning, I worked on churn models, but at the same time, I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to work at such scale in the company where the data pipelines were very established and mature. So I was able to build churn models that had quite a lot of scale, quite a lot of features, and they're updated and scored on a daily basis.
Mhm.
So I think that I learned a lot from that, and this was all. I mentioned all of these from my previous role, and before that, I had a few personal projects that I worked on before I got my first role. So, which is basically how I got my first role, as well as some that actually might have helped me get my second role. So, actually, I think I'll start with the one in the middle on the right side, which is the Reddit and Steam scraping time series and some other types of panel data analysis. So that's just like a fancy way of saying like time series over
Mhm.
more people, or well, more demographics.
It's like tabular time series. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I worked on that during grad school, actually. So this is the one thing that I think really helped me is because I studied economics in grad school, right? We Economics works a lot with data already. So you might think of tax data, let's say housing pricing data. So in Canada, we have this thing called the Canadian Census, which gathers like kind of in this household, how many people do you have? Like how much do you earn? I forgot the details, but maybe in the States, there's other types of, yeah, like census
Yep.
data like that. And it was working a lot with that kind of data because economists like end up going to, let's say we have Statistics Canada or like Bank of Canada, so there's probably the equivalent in the States as well, like those that are like, hey, the tax raise like caused like X% of like tobacco sales to drop, like
Yeah.
stuff like
Totally.
that. Yeah, so that was a lot of data and stats training, which did happen to me in school. However, the downside was that there was no real programming knowledge that I actually gained from school at all. So there was a proprietary software that we were using, which was called Stata, and that
Oh
was,
God.
yeah, that was used in school.
You
So
get
it
chills.
seems like you've heard of it too.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that, and I think people in psychology they use something like SPSS or something
Yep.
like, yeah, like so those, they did not really help me much in the whole Python interviewing front. They didn't really help me at all, apart from like trying to write a for loop in like 5 lines of code. Don't quote me. I don't remember anything from that time. And I don't particularly remember like the exact syntax in Stata, but I think economics gave me the stats portion, and then my random side hobby of making video games actually gave me the Python portion. So those are
Nice.
my projects that I did. So the web scraping, because I just wanted to do it for no reason, while others might be doing more like the housing data or tax data that I mentioned earlier. And I was like,
Mhm.
I guess I'm in economics and I really like economics, but I just dislike economics like data. So let me just go and scrape Reddit data instead,
That's
and
amazing.
yeah, and do like video game data, because I was like really well, I mean, I still am kind of like everything's about video games, and I just try to make a way to shoehorn my my school projects with some sort of like Python web scraping for
Smart.
just out of curiosity and just like really random. And actually, at the time, like I actually did not really know there was a field called data science. My friend was saying, "Hey, you have you know Python from game development, and you know stats." And actually, there was a field that's called data science. And then I had to Google it, and then I Googled it, and then I discovered that that was a thing. And this is before I got my first role, right? Just to make the
Hmm.
timeline more clear. So that was how I really first started. So I understand that I probably did have a little bit of a okay background in terms of like Python, but then I also never had used pandas or NumPy or anything. I
Totally.
never heard of it because I was using it for game development. Like game development does not use NumPy, does not use pandas,
Yeah.
and I literally had to learn it from scratch. Like I guess like a lot of folks who are
W3
starting
schools or
out.
something. Yeah.
Actually, let
One
me
thing I do want to
think. Yeah.
one thing I do want to ask is, and one thing I tips I usually give quite often is, did you create any UI or any blog posts related to these personal projects that made that took your project to the next level, or did you kind of post them in a GitHub page and kind of left it as that? Did you present your projects in a unique way that really grabbed people's attentions?
Ooh, yeah. So I posted it on GitHub. And then I think it was mostly the README because for the one below, so there's two of these that were Ariana Grande themed, as you can see. Yeah, like I just do random things that I want to do. And there was a web app, but then I only had it locally because I just didn't want to pay for hosting. And I just
Makes
had
sense.
a video of it on the README, I think. But I think the video hosting site has since just like I think they deleted videos on a rolling basis, so I actually can't find it right now.
No, that's fine.
Um,
I think the one thing I try to mention and emphasize to anyone trying to break in is, don't don't stop at just writing the code. Actually
mhm.
present it in a meaningful way so that anyone can engage with whatever you're putting out, whether it's a web app or a YouTube video or a Medium article. Find too often that candidates would just kind of write a bunch of code and just leave it at that, which I don't really think
Mhm.
is enough, especially if you're trying to attract the attention of recruiters.
Yes.
So I was curious to
Yes.
see, just curious to know what you did. Cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. And I've been doing some mentoring sessions and like resume critique sessions before, and there was a lot of things that I saw, which I'll just really quickly mention and might go into more detail in the Q&A. Is that I've seen candidates who they have their GitHub, and then I look at their GitHub, but then it's like there's no description at all. I don't really know
Yeah,
what it is, and then I click into it, and it's literally just like a folder, like a folder. Everything else is nested in that folder, and then I click into it, and then it's like more nested folders and still no readme. So at that time, I have to, unfortunately, I have to close the tab and then just like continue to look at something else. But I've suggested to some people I've seen this, right? Just like have your readme out in the open. And if you have graphs that are like in some nested folders, bring it out to the readme. And then I've actually seen someone who improved their GitHub so much that they actually got a pretty good role recently. And I was just very happy that they did take that advice to heart, right? Like from the
great.
nested folder, can't find anything situation to like having a pretty clean, and for the interviewer to just click on it and
Exactly.
in one glance like see what it is. Yeah, so I think those are helpful tips. But yeah, like I this is a screenshot from like my readme actually. So it did have some like imagery here and there, just like show what it is as well. And I guess like a video that now doesn't
Cool.
work, but at the time did work.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so I think these were what did help me in terms of showing that okay, I know Python, but like do I know Python for data science, right? Like these projects did help bridge that gap. And I also did get asked a lot, oh, you studied economics, like why data science? So I
Of
think
course.
the
Yeah,
portfolio projects were essential, like absolutely essential. Like not even the game dev stuff could like really help me there. Not even, because they're like, yeah, Python, but it's just like for game development, so
it's
it's
very
not really
different.
relevant, yeah, to them. So
Especially
like
like I've built
mhm.
projects where like I built models that to scale that maybe had like 50 to 100 lines of code. Like the coding is very different from software engineering to data science. Like a lot of times the code is pretty concise. It's more about the stats that really kind of drives home kind of the value of any code you put together.
Mhm. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different ways. Actually, I found that something that helped me, but I think I do recommend people try this at least once. It's just like get a raw data set, like your own raw data set. I think this is probably going above and beyond, but like beyond like Kaggle or something like Iris. Yeah, like that it helped me so much with my first role with dealing with just like real world data. It actually surprisingly helped, even though I kind of did it initially as just like kind of like a prank, like, hey, I just want to scrape Reddit. Yeah, but it actually
Yeah.
taught me so much about real world data, and I was able to just like get started really quickly at my first role because of that. So yeah, the next section, which is how do you market yourself or share your content? And for me, right now, I have two main channels of this. So the first one I'm going to mention is my personal website. And I've actually got asked this before, like, why do I host it on my own domain and have my own website? So it's suthanshu.com. Like, why not necessarily have it on Medium? And this is kind of like an interesting decision for me. And I don't find it necessarily better or worse, but I'll just share my perspective. Is that first of all, I have the most control of the content. Like I can do whatever I want with it. And I know it's the same with Medium, but I can adjust like the size of the headers, the fonts, like, what color the hyperlinks are. Like it's more like that kind of control that I really wanted. And kind of as a random side effect, it became like a coding portfolio. Like it doesn't really showcase a massive amount of skill, but it's more just like, oh, I know more than Python actually. And I talk to a lot of people that do web development, and then I can kind of hold a pretty decent conversation with them about like some sort of design or how did they implement this or that. And it's thanks to playing around with my website. So it does just help a little bit in a like non-direct way, which seems to be a trend in a lot of the projects that I did. Like the whole just for fun or just because I randomly want to kind of way. And the third reason I have my personal website is just that, yeah, I guess it showcases my communication skills and technical skills as well, because I sometimes have articles that show different things, and I find that people actually search for it. Like there's one on like setting up a I think like a Debian server on DigitalOcean to host a site, and then like I see like it shows up on a keyword search, and I think that helps too. And I think the third and fourth point both apply regardless if you have your own domain and your own kind of self-hosted site, or if you're using GitHub pages or not. But I think the top 2 points are just like for me personally why I chose to do that. And the second place I post regularly on is LinkedIn. So I write once every week, and then I just post on LinkedIn when I write on it. So I don't make an effort to post every day on LinkedIn. I make an effort to post every week on LinkedIn. And this definitely differs for from person to person quite a bit. And I've seen slow and steady growth of my readership. I actually get a lot of hits to my blog from LinkedIn because I think people have come to expect, or just like they can anticipate that I'll post something new, and then they'll be able to check it out once I post it on LinkedIn. And yeah, people hear from me from both of these venues. Like I've actually heard just like many times, like, oh, like my friend follows your blog, or like I know that article that you wrote, or I've shared your article with like let's say my team at work. Like I've heard this a few
Yeah.
times, and actually quite a lot of times. And I think this is really helpful, but it's actually really important to me. So something that I find important, and I think that's what you're doing too, right? Is like I can't scale my impact linearly with, I guess, like the hours that I spend, kind of in a sense. So okay,
Yeah.
writing articles or like sharing webinars like this, hosting like you are doing, you're able to have this content that even though I'm not continuing to put more hours into an article I already put out, it can actually keep helping people, like
Of
I guess
course.
as
Yeah.
I'm sleeping, or like for you, right? Like your videos will keep helping people, and your events will keep helping people like once you put in the initial effort into it. And I think that's really important to me. It's actually really surprising, and something that I wasn't anticipating before, and
Totally.
that's become really really kind of satisfying to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's so I just like riffing a bit, like I
Hmm.
had no intention to like actually put together YouTube content at all. Like I was like so adverse to like that side of content creation. It just seemed like so much work. It seemed like such a hassle. But I just realized like while mentoring folks, while talking to people at work, these discussions, if we could just create it in a format that's easily accessible to anyone to watch in their own time, I
Hmm.
feel like that is like the biggest impact you could possibly have, right? Like, and on like my YouTube comments, you see like I put together something that teaches you how to present data science projects, right? And hearing people say like a week, 3 weeks later that, oh, this helped me like present my projects to these clients, etc. I think that's just like that's it, right? That's why like you do this, because I would have never been able to help that person in that way unless I put out this reproducible content, right?
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it's a weird sensation. I feel like I haven't gotten used to it. Like it's just
Yeah, me neither, to be honest. Like I'm still getting used to it as
yeah.
well.
And another thing I want to mention here, right? I think stressing it showcased your communication technical skills is so important. And I feel like everyone on this call, if you're going to take away one thing, I think that's probably the biggest thing to take away, because I don't think people realize how non-technical data science is. It sounds like such an
Hmm.
oxymoron,
Hmm.
but you're more times than not, you're going to be working with people who really aren't that technical, who are going to need to be leveraging your model, right? Like, let's just take your churn model. Typically, the people who use a churn model aren't that technical. They're like maybe people in marketing,
Yes,
CRM,
yes,
etc.,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they're never going to trust what you do unless you could accurately convey the value of the model, how the model works, what went into the model. And if you don't have those strong communication and technical skills, or sorry, communication skills, it's gonna like you're gonna it's an uphill battle. Like it's just so hard to gain momentum in like any organization because people can't grasp what you're doing.
Hmm.
So it's funny because people worry about working on the next big state of the art model, but focusing on your communication skills, I think makes it that much easier for you to get that first job.
It
And
does.
that was a bit of a monologue, but I
No,
think
no, no.
that point
I
is
completely agree.
that point is so important for everyone to grasp, because I more often than not, candidates and entry level folks just do not consider that at all when they're building up their portfolio. Um, yeah,
Yeah. No, I
end scene,
couldn't have
end
said it
scene.
better. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. I totally agree. Now, I'll actually share a quick example from this. I'll just like leave it on this page for now, but I'll just share what kind of from when I first started, and probably okay, I'm gonna start from before I even joined data science or entered the data science fields, right? So I was doing my master's at U of T, University of Toronto. Everyone around me is extremely technical, extremely smart, right? The way we would talk is at a level of like we're talking about just like I guess we're using math to talk to you. I'm not exaggerating. Like this is for real. Like we're just like sitting in this like basement, like grad student lounge, just like like writing proofs and stuff till like 2 a.m. Like I'm serious. And going from that level to I guess when I first started my first role, and okay, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on about that process, which actually you can find here. Just I just wanted to show
Mhm.
like there's stuff that I wrote about it, but I will also quickly mention it. So this is kind of funny. At the time, I interviewed for two vastly different roles. One was a project coordinator, so it's kind of like a I guess like a PM track in
Mhm.
gaming at a big gaming company, which is Ubisoft. So that's like literally not technical. And then the other role
Yeah,
was the Bell Canada data science role, and I actually got both of them. I guess both with the help of my game development stuff as well as my data science portfolio. But for the PM role, it was definitely my communication skills and
totally.
like some other leadership experience that I had. So I did like student union. I led like a team of like 20 people. So this is like a
Mhm.
some random tangent, but that really helped me, and that was unexpected. I just did it to have fun, make friends. And I still have a lot of those friends that eventually went on to tech. Actually, funny how I
Totally.
guess like
Makes sense.
like-minded people just like gathered together. But it was like these things that really helped me in terms of the communication part. And I think that like what you said, right? The helping the people use your model, because if I was just when I was first starting out, I was also kind of like I just went from grad school, right? Like talking in just like like very technical terms to, trying to translate it to human
Very
language. I
different.
wasn't that good at first. I was like, hey, like this algorithm, like this is how like this works. And
It
like
just goes
very,
over their head.
yeah, very, very in the weeds. And then I realized that um it doesn't really help my case and my projects, right? So then I started just trying to explain things better, and it worked, right? It landed me on better projects, and I was presenting about those projects. But I think it's kind of like a virtuous cycle though. Like
Of course.
I first like did decently on it, decently at communication, got placed on project. That project helped me get better at communication. But communication is the way that I call it as a multiplier to technical skills, because I guess I did code and release a whole game that is literally being played and sold on consoles and computers. Like I'm not very I'm not lacking confidence on that point. However, I think that being able to, let's say, someone else at this exact same technical level but with like less communication skills, like it's not a linear, this is my opinion, of course, subjectively. Like
Hmm.
it's not a linear difference, but rather just like having some sort of communication skills can be like 2x, like 3x
100%.
almost someone's career. I made those numbers up, but
No,
hopefully
of course.
hopefully you
Of
get
course.
the
No,
the
I
idea.
think,
Hmm.
and I know we should probably dive into the Q&A
Yes,
section
let's.
soon, but what I've realized and what I try to describe to folks is data science sounds like a very technical role, right? So they think it's just like almost like being an engineer, but it is
Hmm.
not. Data scientists are not engineers. I feel like, especially at Disney, data scientists are involved with high level strategy of an organization, how you're going to move forward, how you're going to leverage data. And I think that aspect of the job is very non-technical. It's like big picture thinking, strategizing, and delivering on those strategies using your data science knowledge. But that never gets talked about. I feel like a lot of people misconstrue data science as machine learning engineering, and I feel like people need to realize they're two different things.
Hmm.
Um, if you want to be a data scientist, it's like I said, more non-technical than you'd actually imagine.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's different. But I guess, okay, for our point about communication, like let's say there's a ML engineer and they're good at communication, still it's still like 1.5x or 2
Oh, for
2x.
sure,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
I still do think that. So and yeah, like I think we can kind of get started on the Q&A. So I mean, hopefully I can get a little help here. Like, do I try to like
Yeah,
look
let
it
me
up
just
or?
introduce the whole Q&A section. I
Hmm.
want to just plug a few things before we get started, just some shameless plugs.
Hmm.
So if you guys can all check out the chat, I put together all kind of helpful content that I think you guys can leverage. Mine and Susan's LinkedIn, my blog with all the educational content, and the one I'm going to focus on quite a bit. I don't ask for much, guys. I try to set these up. I want these to be free, but if you can show your support and check out the YouTube channel and subscribe, I would appreciate that so much. Just getting off the ground, I think you'll find this this Q&A recording. You'll find all the previous Q&A recordings, along with just a ton of kind of educational content that I think you guys will love. So check that out. Please subscribe. I really appreciate it. And definitely, let me also put Susan's blog in here as well. Check out her blog, and I know she has a ton of helpful information there as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course, and with that out of the way, and yeah, please do subscribe. But with that out of the way, let's hop into questions. I feel like we have 60 questions, so we'll go through these pretty quickly. Okay, so Gregory asks, I'm currently working as an admin assistant and a junior data analyst. I'm thinking of downloading tools as a pet project to simulate how the business would run using these programs and use that as experience. Is this a valid way to build data science experience? What other ways could one build data science experience outside of working as one?
Ooh, yeah, I think that's a good question. And this kind of ties back into, let's say, when I was at school and then I used the side projects to show that I could work with data. So I, I guess regardless of if you mean you're using like, let's say your company's data, or if you're using some external data source, I didn't quite like catch that part. But regardless, I think it's totally valid to play around with some data sets. And I totally totally I like shill projects all the time. Like I think projects and like the clear communication of projects is extremely important, and playing around with tools like see what you like with projects can help you do that.
Yeah, yeah, and Gregory, I would mention if you are in an organization that has data scientists, set up a meeting with them, and more often than not, they'll definitely let you like either work on a component of their project or let you shadow. I've done that with data analysts at Disney to help them get the experience that they need. So that's an opportunity for you to get hands-on experience as well.
Yeah, and if you do mean like internally, then it's probably even better because you already have access to some of those like real world
Exactly.
examples.
Cool. Next question. Alexandria asks, at what point in learning data science can you start applying for jobs? I'm a home learner and I want to make sure I have enough experience, but I also don't know if I ever feel like I've learned enough to start applying.
Okay. My personal experience is I think start applying sooner than later, because I've seen a lot of candidates like they want to be extremely ready, and I know what that feels. I used to be like that as well. I wanted to just like take this one more do this one more project, or like, like read just one more book. And that doesn't really work out, I think, because you get better at applying by applying, right? Like writing,
Exactly.
fixing up your resume and doing some interviews. Like I learned the most about interviewing from interviews. And I think it's okay to start even when you don't feel ready. But probably don't apply for like your dream job and like bomb it. Like you probably have some sort of like internal idea, right? Or ask around for people, or join sessions like this, which you'll get a better idea of like what's needed. But I think you can just like, don't let imposter syndrome hold you back if you've already had some knowledge, and learn from interviewing. Learn about interviewing from interviewing.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't say more. I mean, it's never too early, right? There's actually no harm ever to start applying, like none
Mhm.
whatsoever. Cool. I hope that was helpful. Another question about Alexandria. At your company, are you creating the projects you work on, or do they give the projects to you?
Ooh, I think this is a very good question. So I'm going to talk about when I was more junior at my first role. I Those projects were given to me. They were already scoped out. They were already kind of partially in the works, or maybe like the low level work had been started, and there was funding for it, of course. And
Mhm.
I guess budget might be the better word. It was approved, everything like that. But right now, as I moved into a more senior role, like I have a lot of input into what is important and why I think it's important and why I think it'll work. So there is a difference there. But I think when I was more junior, the reason why I could move and learn so quickly is because I was able to deliver things. I was able to put in the work and deliver the things. And this does not mean pulling all nighters, actually, because I find that when if someone's like coding, it actually coding when they're really tired, it actually causes them to waste more time the next day. So I just like shut things off at like my end time, which is like 5 or 6, depending when in the day I start. And then I just leave it for the next day. Yeah, so I don't know if that went slightly off topic, but just like if I could, yeah, if I came up with my own when I was junior, no. When now, yes.
Yeah, same here. When I first joined, same thing. Right now, I kind of create all of my projects because
Hmm.
I'm trying to create the data science group within our org. But what I would recommend, and this is like some bosses can get annoyed by this, but it never hurts to recommend projects, even if you're just starting out. It's just a way to look good, get some brownie points, and you never know, they might actually greenlight a project that you create, which is great for the resume when you're starting out.
That's an awesome suggestion.
Yeah, just got a brown nose, right? Just gotta make yourself look good.
Smart.
Okay, let's see. Okay, as a home learner, I eventually want to add to my portfolio group projects to show that I could work on a team. How would you suggest finding other data scientists, web developers, and backend people to do a group project?
Ooh, that's a good question. I actually don't exactly know um, the exact answer, seeing as I didn't really do side projects with a group. But I guess if I had to do that, yes, I guess I could try to assemble, let's say, a Kaggle team online. I mean, not letting that be your only project, but since you really want to demonstrate teamwork, you can, tailor ways to make that kind of team showcase the team aspect of it. I think there are sites like probably have side projects which you can reach out to people on. I think dev.to might be one of such sites, but I don't know if they were. It's just like where people post blogs and um, content and side projects. I'm not sure if they have some sort of dedicated section for that, but I would probably start from there. It's surprising how people can come together to do projects, but I mean, I guess the same as with school. Some people might just like ghost you eventually, but it
Totally.
depends. It depends. Or you could, yeah, like people from those groups is how I would approach it. But yeah, if someone in let's say the chat had some experience, then they can feel free to share that as well. I don't have direct experience doing that outside of work per se.
Yeah, I guess same here. I only have anecdotal experience where I've had some friends actually through LinkedIn groups
Ooh.
just post that they had this idea and they just want a team to work on. And it's unbelievable how like friendly people can be. And
Mm-hmm.
just with Reddit and the fact that Reddit had this much exposure and got this many people, I would post on Reddit as well. I personally not done that, but you guys should totally try, and hopefully that is a way to meet teammates.
Okay, sudden answer came to me. Hackathons might be a good way to do that actually, because they force you to do teams, so then you don't have to worry about people ghosting as much. People might, you know, flutter off on the second or third day, but I mean, it's still probably safer than
It's something.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. It's good. Hackathons, check that out.
This is a good question. I think a lot of people wonder is, do you often work on multiple projects at once?
Ooh, okay. This is a very, very good question, and there's going to be a lot of subjectiveness
Yeah.
on this. So, I personally like having a main project, so 70% of my bandwidth and more, and probably another project for spice and in case of any kind of like, I guess like fatigue is the right word here. So yeah, I like having that, and I think on a meta sense, um, outside of work. So my work is my 70% thing in my life, and then my blog and stuff is the 30% thing in my life, and then um, in work in that 70% there's like another 70% which is like a big work project, and there's like another 30% which is like a smaller work project. I don't mind that, and this is actually kind of what I find has worked well for me. Maybe there's some other combination that does work as well, but I haven't really went out of my way to attempt a different thing. But I know what does not work for me is 50-50, because I find that it's hard to do well on both of them. But that's just my personal preference here.
For sure. I started out with data science consulting, so I think I was working on minimum two projects at the same time at work,
Mm-hmm.
and then at most it hit four projects at once, and
Whoa.
it was miserable. That's why I left after like just under 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I think on average, I'm working on two projects at once. Just kind of how things work out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess kind of similar
Yeah, seems
here.
very
Well,
similar.
minus the consulting part, but yeah, like ended up on two.
For sure. Let's see. Next question. What kind of projects are employers looking for in a portfolio?
Ooh, this is a also a good question, and also a very it kind of depends situation. But I will say what works for me. I think let's take a step back. They do want to see that, let's say you have, I guess, machine learning theory skills, knowledge, and like programming skills, let's say. But why do they want that? Like, they actually really, what they want you to do is you come into the company and the company has some data and you've never seen this data before and you don't really have a lot of explanation about this data. Like, can you do something about it? And kind of like bring some sort of findings or like some sort of model in production to the company, right? So what they're really looking for is someone who's able to go into a new environment and just like do something that and complete that something and have that something related to data bring value. That's what they really want. So I found that the way my projects did that is because I guess I've worked with messy data before and just like web scrape data, like kind of randomish data. So I think that that was able to show that I could work with just like that kind of messy data and then deliver something. However, if you don't happen to have that kind of messy data, that's okay as well. But then the second part, right, is like I mentioned, like this data is something you've not seen before because usually the company's data is proprietary, right? So if you're using a lot of all your projects are something that like are literally just like what thousands of other people have, it doesn't stand out exactly as much to me as I review resumes. So I think to answer the question once again is like what are they looking for? They're looking for someone who can make data projects independently, like if I were to like go like super high level. um and you can show that with many ways, but just like try to not be the exact same as everyone else because that actually ends up not showing the kind of independent part of it. That's my what I've seen in industry.
That's amazing advice. I hope you guys got that. I think I I always try to reframe the question, like not what kind of projects, but what do you want the project to show, and start
Mhm.
with that, and then come up with a use case that kind of gets there. Because like you mentioned, like when I look at a description on a resume, I want to see like what type of feature engineering did they did, how do they optimize their model, right? What evaluation metric did they use to optimize the model? I want to hear about that and see them do that and do that well,
Mhm.
because that showcases, okay, look, if they're getting if they're struggling with the model, they know how to optimize, or they know how they can go about optimizing a model versus like a really cookie cutter project that they put on their resume that really doesn't add that much value.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, Edwin says, this is a long one. Currently double majoring in biology and information sciences in Puerto Rico. I used to focus on going to med school, but lately I've been really interested in data science and bioinformatics. Honestly, here in the island, we don't have people that do this job, so I don't have any mentorship nor people that do these jobs. However, I'm still interested in considering studying this.
Mhm.
Any tips for deciding if this is a thing I might like? I'm afraid of committing to graduate school that I later regret on pursuing.
Ooh, yeah, I guess that's a good question. And like for me, I guess retroactively looking, I kind of try things and see what sticks. Like I've tried more things than I guess the ones that did stick, which are data science and game development and writing. Um but for your situation, I think the right now everyone's working remotely. So actually you'll have a pretty good chance of reaching out to people from I guess different geographies like in the states or in Canada, and then maybe invite them to just like have a quick chat about their um day to day and stuff. And I guess I have my advice for these is have specific questions so that they can
Mhm.
give you like non cookie cutter answers. Like for your specific situation, you outlined a lot of your um background and your environment, so that was helpful. So I think one, you can reach out to people from all over the world on I think LinkedIn, and that's good. The second part is how can you see if you like it? I guess you could start by doing either projects or even Kaggle or hackathons, right? So those three are options to kind of mimic in a very low cost way, right? And then maybe when you do one of those, like maybe you literally just spend like a day or two. I guess first you might have to take some courses or something to maybe get your let's say programming skills or something that you're less comfortable with up to a okay amount, and then you spend like 1 or 2 days literally doing either a project or like a quick Kaggle competition or a hackathon. That's such a low cost way of seeing if you want to trade it for a larger side project. So if you liked it, then you can do a side project that takes a week to do. If you didn't like it, then maybe you can try another short project and see. Or it's kind of like iteration in a sense and experimenting. So I think it's possible with the internet. There's some options.
Yeah, can't emphasize those coffee chats enough. Such an easy way to understand like what the day in the life is like. So great advice. James asks, since presenting is a huge part of data science, how can you improve on this?
Ooh, yeah, this is a really great question. So I'm going to answer it in two parts. The first part is before you actually get a job. So I think before you get a job, there are some options to practice speaking skills. They could be at school. Like actually at school, I had a surprising amount of just like presenting group stuff, but I don't know if this is a function of being in economics or not. It might be, or just like offer to okay, let's say tutor or lead a study group. Like that has helped me so much. Actually, I forgot to mention this. So at school I was a TA, and that helped me so much in terms of translating a more difficult topic to something of that someone from some other level of expertise will understand, right? Because it's their first time literally hearing about this, and they're also in undergrad, they're not in grad school. But like kind of being able to like go down a layer a bit, like that skill is trainable at school. So even tutoring I think helped me build that skill when before I started working, and without doing stuff like Toastmasters, because I didn't do that.
Mhm.
But I think school helped me, even though it was more technical communication, right? Because I guess I mentioned TAing is great, but it's still like on the technical side, but it helps quite a lot. It helped me a lot. That was how I built my communication skills when I was at school. After I joined work, there were opportunities to speak, um, but at the time I was relatively low tenured. So I mean, I was new. I was a newbie, but I was able to get pretty awesome speaking experiences both in and out of work. So outside of work, I mentioned I was joining and co-hosting the meetup, and that helped me get hosting as well as speaking experience. So that was totally just like a volunteer position, right? So you are able to do that outside of work. That is for sure if you make kind of the effort to do that. And actually, at school, one can do that too with clubs. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. And at work, there are opportunities to do public speaking, and don't be afraid to ask about those, because I think I had experience speaking outside of work, and then that just led to more speaking opportunities inside internally as well. But for others, it could be the other way around.
And at work, if you're entry level, you just have to go for it. I feel like being a little aggressive for the opportunities you want goes a long way. So like I think what I did when I first started, like maybe I wasn't going to be allowed to present, but I just asked. I was like, hey, do you mind if I present slides 3 through 7 or slides XYZ, right? Just ask. And then like if he says no, he'll give you a reason why. And then okay, you've learned what you need to improve on or XYZ. And then maybe next time you will be able to. But just shoot for it, right? And like, literally no harm. Honestly, it just looks good because it shows you're super ambitious. So there really is nothing to lose from asking to present a portion of a presentation.
Yeah, I agreed with that. And I got a lot of opportunities by simply asking. Like, a lot of opportunities because I asked. And it wasn't a very far-fetched ask, right? Like you said, like you mentioned, like let's say 3 to 4 slides, right? Like who I mean, people might deny that if it's like super high stakes, but like if it's just like a normal presentation, like who's gonna, deny that? But then we might worry a lot, like, oh my God, like I'm gonna mess it up. But in fact, just ask.
Exactly. Um, okay, next. What's the difference between data analysis and data science? And are there any other data fields that I don't know yet?
Oh yeah, this is I'm trying to condense this into like extremely short. So I'm going to generalize a bit here. In what I've seen that's common in, let's say, job descriptions with data analysts is like um they do stuff that is more, they analyze data, that is the same thing. Data scientists have to do that. Okay, sorry, like water is wet. Data analysts analyze data. But um
Funny.
from what I've seen is that they do kind of like more okay, past looking slash like what's happening like at this slice of time. So they might use machine learning techniques, actually, like clustering, which could tell you like at this point in time like some sort of group is larger, or like some group composition, or like backwards looking. But then I find that what I've seen more in industry with data science positions that are not data science, like posted as data analyst or something, or the other way around. Like let's assume it's like a real data scientist position to me, is that they also need to analyze data and get training data and clean data and everything. But then it's more common that they do like more forward and predictive work. Once again, this is highly generalized. It's just what I've
Mhm.
seen more commonly as a very high level. And you mentioned like what are some other roles? Like there are data engineers to ensure that the data from various sources. So I guess to mention the telecom example is that they had, let's say it's a business, right? They have a physical store, right? So there could be a data source that's like a point of sale system, like a cashier, that has to just like flow through every night in a reliable fashion. There could be a website for that business, and that data also needs to flow through in a
Mhm.
reliable fashion to a centralized place, which then the data analysts and the data scientists can use. So that work is kind of done by, I guess, like either operations or software, like data platform, or data engineers. I A lot of these terms, they're super like, they have a lot of synonyms, and they might be doing similar things. But yeah, if you wanted an umbrella term for that, like probably data engineer. um yeah, so I guess that's something else to look for. There's other roles like ML ops, which is like ML operations, which is kind of like um I guess from software there's a term called DevOps, which is like ensuring like uptime and like automation, um like software building. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
go into too much detail on that like right now, but I hope that's something that you were able to, that can help you like explore some other aspects.
Yeah, I think Tiffany kind of touches upon it, and I completely agree with your assessment. I think data analysts typically are doing retroactive analysis. Sure, they're using it to fuel strategies that are forward thinking, but the analysis and what they're doing with the data is all retroactive, right? It's all like historically looking. Whereas data scientists are actually leveraging data to do data driven projections, which usually analysts don't do. I don't know if you've seen it. I haven't seen them do that quite a bit.
Yeah,
There's a
not too
couple.
much.
There's a couple follows. So Sir there mentions that on Reddit they say data scientists spend 50% of their times doing ETL jobs. In my experience, I've actually in any data science role I've been in up until today has not done ETL jobs, like building ETL jobs. That was mainly built by machine learning engineers and data engineers.
Hmm.
Every role in organization is different. Just in my experience, I data scientists really don't build ETL jobs at all.
Yeah, I'll say, I'll just like quickly follow up on that. Like I have done it before, but that was like a very small aspect of it. So it was just the reason being that for, I think like for a model I needed like this custom transformation, like real quick, like not major, and then I just wrote something that would automatically do that on a day-to-day basis that I needed, like kind of an ad hoc fashion. But I mean, that's, it's not my, as a data scientist, I wasn't writing the ETL that was like literally feeding into what everyone was using. Like, no, no, I wasn't doing that at the time. But unless you're in a very small startup, or if they kind of had some sort of title mismatch, which does happen in the industry, right? Like
Yeah.
some postings, they just have headcount changes or team changes, and that happens. But I wouldn't say that's like the most of what my experience as a data scientist has been. Like
Mhm.
basically not too much writing ETL, but more um Yeah, like if it's like data cleaning
Hmm.
for models, then yes, but not that kind of ETL.
Definitely. Let's see. What's the hardest part of your day to day?
Ooh, good question. Let me see. Okay, one thing that was more apparent to me after I started a role. So as a student, right, I could just like kind of be in the flow zone or just like have a flow state, just be working on something for many hours and just like have a really good time at it. Um, After starting work, I realized there is this kind of good balance of meetings and technical work. And I find that I like to block my technical work hours so that I can focus on it without context switching. So that means like maybe I'm working on some code and then I just like quickly hop off to join a half-hour meeting and then hop back. Then there's some sort of um like I'm slightly disconnected. I need to spend like 5 to 10 minutes or maybe more just to get back to that state where I was. So
Hmm.
um I guess my answer is just like that's what I found is managing time is hard. Like I do that fairly okay, I would say, seeing as I did a part-time master's while I was working full-time and also developed the game and sold the game while I was working full-time. So I have learned a lot about time management, but um I needed to do that at work as well. Just like kind of protect my flow time and my deep work time. Yeah, so that's hard. Not in a bad way though. I think it's part of the job. Like I'm not going to be someone who doesn't take meetings because right, people and communication are important. So people will use my what my technical work does. Otherwise my technical work is wasted if no one's using it, right? So I will take meetings. I want to take meetings. Just like kind of that calendar Tetris is hard. Yeah. So that's my answer.
Totally. I think for me, this is just out of my own impatience, but dealing with non-technical executives, I feel like that's like 60% of my job lately. And it's,
Mm.
I don't know, having to hear someone use data science as a verb has got to be the most aggravating thing. Like hearing people say do data science and having to like get them on board and work with them on on a day-to-day basis is so unbelievably frustrating. Probably the hardest thing, just getting them to like advocate for data science when they don't know anything about data science is super difficult for me at least.
Yeah, it's definitely
Um,
part of the challenge. That's for sure. That's why people
totally,
skills help. Yeah.
exactly. Um, I guess I could answer this once. What are your thoughts on Harvard Extension courses? So I did a lot of my grad work through Harvard Extension. I absolutely loved it. They don't
Mhm.
segregate um, the online students and the in-person students. Even before COVID, they kind of jumble them all together. So it's kind of great. You don't feel like you're getting miffed by being in an online program. It's just as good as being there, except you're just online versus being there. I can't say enough good things. I learned so much going through Harvard Extension.
I see. Yeah, I can't comment on that because I haven't. So I guess that was a question meant for you.
Yep. Um, I'll answer this a little bit later. It's a question about Disney. This we answered. All right, this is going. What's your advice for newbies or entry level data scientists?
Ooh, yeah. So I guess it's that they have already started the role. I think there's like several things here. One is for me when I first started, I wasn't expecting the amount of time to understand some sort of business logic. I would say, so like why is let's say it was for like the churn model. I would say as an example. So I guess in a business when they have data stored, and they have different kind of lines of business. So it could be like let's say internet or like a phone, or I mean for Disney, let me guess, you have like, let's say, parks or like some sort of Disney Plus stuff, like, but they have different kind of like IDs or memberships. And
Yeah.
then maybe sometimes you want to like join them, and then they're called something different. Like one is called like, I don't know, like customer ID. The other one calls like park ID or something. And then just like no one tells you that. Well, people do tell you that, but like it's hard to remember that and then find the data that you need because of the way that things are set up, or because the data warehouse is like just so massive and there's so many tables. Like that's something that I suggest that you spend some time understanding, like talk to people, ask people, and get that kind of knowledge to navigate things. Because I feel that my first couple of weeks, even months, was spent learning to navigate things. And once I could do that, it was just like much more smoother. Because let's say, okay, I know how to program, like, okay, but there's no data. So like, as in like, I wasn't trying to say like, oh yeah, I could just like program up a storm. So like, not like that. As in like, even if you can do one thing and you can't find the data, then it's like useless. Basically, that's what I learned. So I think as a new person, like that's what I really needed to learn and what I really needed to hear. And I'm glad that I was able to spend time on it, but I just suggest like spending some time on it.
Completely agree. And I think another thing I'd mention um, is don't just ask the question, come up with potential solutions, and then go to your superior and discuss those potential solutions. I feel like it's such a, for me, a massive pet peeve. It could just be unique to me, but I get really frustrated when someone like finds a bunch of solutions that don't like try to like problem solve, because at the end of the day you end up being useful once you can start problem solving and executing on those solutions. So do that from day one. Just propose as many solutions just so you work through that exercise with your superiors. Like that doesn't happen enough, and it's just so frustrating.
Yeah, good
um,
point. Good point.
as you could tell, I'm very frustrated by that. This is a really good question. I'm a brand new graduate, and a lot of companies want some production level coding experience. How do you work on that without kind of having a job? How would you get that experience ahead of time?
Yeah. I have a very, very concrete suggestion for this. So yeah, I think making a web app, which is what part of what I did before, it shows that you know how to put something kind of in production. I mean, technically, yes. Like if it's a web app, even if it's simple, it doesn't have to be pretty. My web app was so ugly. It had like two buttons that were like the default buttons and it
Mhm.
was just not good looking at all. But it showed that I knew how to just like get data that's just not sitting there like as dead code, but that it's like up and running in a sense. So I think connecting a data science model to a web app is really, really good free experience. And I think people can use free stuff, like I think Heroku is one good
Mhm.
option that I've seen people use. And there's tons of tutorials on it, like tons. I happen to do mine like without Heroku and without hosting it on the web, but it just like worked, right? So if I put it on a server, it would have worked. But then I was able to showcase that with a video that I captured at the time. So I think that actually, if I were I review a lot of resumes, like both in my old role and currently I review resumes as well. Like if I see that, it does help a lot. Like even well, okay, that's the first step. But like even better is like what I mentioned before, like having some sort of interesting like project that's not like a cookie cutter project that still applies here, right? Because there's definitely some web apps that are like more cookie cutter that I've seen maybe 500 people exaggeration there, but like I know that that's a tutorial, so maybe you can do that and put your own spin on it, right? Like if it's, I've seen one good project where actually I think it was probably based off of some sort of like dog cat classifier, but they changed it to Pokemon, and I was like, yo, I remember. I was like, I remember this project because it was just like clearly not maybe some random tutorial, and they grabbed the data themselves. So that stuck out to me, even though I guess it was based off a tutorial, but like that was great. Like that really demonstrate what you were asking to me at least.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go through a couple more questions. Is it better to be a generalist or specialize in one topic when trying to get your first data science position?
That's a tough one. I think for my type of position, which is not a, let's say, a research scientist at Google DeepMind or something,
Yeah,
like, yeah, like that is specialized. But let's say for industry data scientist, I started as a generalist and I found that to work for me because maybe the company doesn't have a Rexus project, and then you'd have to find a Rexus company, a recommender
exactly.
system company. So it does depend. For me, being a generalist works.
Completely agree. Unless you really want to be in a research role,
Mhm.
then be a specialist. But 90% of jobs in industry are looking for generalists and then figure out what you're good at and then you end up specializing. But for entry level, I think it makes sense to be a generalist. Couldn't agree more.
Mhm.
One thing I will mention, I know we're running out of time. I have all these questions saved. I will probably do like a recording later on by myself, just going through these answers. I don't want you to feel
Mhm.
like you were here and you didn't get to your question asked. Just we had 77 questions asked, which is hard to get through all of them. So I will get through those questions just over the next week or so. So please don't feel frustrated that we couldn't get to your questions today. Let's see. Let's see. What's another good question? What kind of questions do you ask or have been asked in a technical interview?
Yeah, I guess there's a few, like, I guess some sort of probably like explain this kind of algorithm, like even if it's something like explain. I've gotten asked explain logistic regression, explain XGBoost, explain metrics for models. um Stats wise, that's what I kind
Mhm.
of remember. For coding, I've gotten like a variety of
Mhm.
questions. Like I've gotten like whiteboard questions, which are, I guess, more simple. I've gotten this one, which I wasn't. It was like a lead code medium, and I actually didn't really start lead coding at the time. It was like code like this game. It wasn't tic tac toe. It was like some other game, but it was like slightly complicated. And for someone that wasn't really practicing lead code, it definitely caught me off guard. There was another question that I got asked was like, code the YOLO, which is like a image recognition algorithm
Yep.
bounding box. I was able to name that algorithm and explain how it worked. I don't think my implementation of it was like really good. So it's actually not as hard as you think. Like it's more like you have to code like kind of like a start point and then like a kind of like this point plus this amount and then like this point plus this amount on the y-axis. So it coding wise it was okay. But then yeah, I didn't pass that round to be honest. So I've got a
Mhm.
variety of coding questions to be to be frank with you.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's been a lot of case studies. So some whiteboarding, some whiteboarding, but those have been pretty straightforward, just like a lot of SQL tests. But a lot of the big coding assessments have been just take home, like over the weekend, just build this entire thing in a presentation. I feel like I've been getting that quite a bit. Um, and then very
Mm.
simple to you, like proofs of linear regression, logistic regression works when it doesn't work, how to handle multicollinearity, all that stuff. But that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention SQL, but yeah, I definitely got asked a lot of SQL as well. But then those are relatively more straightforward than the kind of like Python, like brain teaser style questions. So yeah, also did get asked SQL too, but I did less case studies for for myself because I think I was kind of busy at the time, and I was just like, if there's a case study, I
Ignore
wasn't
those.
able. Yeah, I wasn't able to do it. I didn't have the bandwidth to do that, unfortunately. But yeah, a lot of people do get jobs through case study interviews, but yeah, just in my experience, I wasn't able to take those.
Yeah, I recently interviewed and actually got the offer at Apple's streaming service,
Hmm.
and theirs was like a take-home project that you have to present to them with an hour-long presentation.
Oh wow,
So
wow.
it's like A lot. Yeah, it was like doing all the coding and building the visualizations and model results, etc., and then presenting it to them and getting grilled for an hour. It
I
was
see.
fun. If you're switching to another field, would you recommend a boot camp or a master's program?
Oh, this is very difficult. I've actually written about it. Not to just like keep shilling, but I've definitely like given this a lot of thought, and it's on my site, which is susanshu.com. But let me tell you what it is that I think. I think it's mostly to do with your opportunity cost. So like let's say I'm working, I don't want to give up my working salary to go into to do a master's unless I am very certain that like the amount of lost salary for that 1 or 2 years is able to be made up like easily. And this sometimes does happen, right? Like you could get such a massive salary bump. But I just encourage you to like think about it. Like it's definitely I think about things a lot in terms of opportunity cost, right? Because there's first of all the year of salary or 2 years salary you give up on and your career progression, right? Like maybe you could have already been a senior data scientist at that point and maybe you didn't need to do the masters. So this is very just like also uncertain, right? There's no guarantee what happens, but I do encourage you to consider a part-time master's or like maybe not stop one's career for so long or take a boot camp. But if you're doing your boot camp, then you need to pad up your resume with more projects, which is what I've seen in practice. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, you're spending less time on the boot camp, but you need to do more things on the kind of like to flesh that kind of portfolio and your like everything. Yeah, so you still need to spend time.
Yeah, like that's so well said. And just think about it from the perspective of a hiring manager. You have someone who has a boot camp or someone who has a master's. Naturally, a master's, there's more studying, so you imagine they know more. To overcome that, your portfolio and resume needs to speak volumes, right? Like
Hmm.
you need to bridge that gap by showing that you've worked on a diverse set of problems that exercised a diverse set of skills. It's a lot more of a hustle, but it still can be done. It just requires a lot more work on the side.
Hmm.
Um, Cheaper, but definitely a lot more work.
Yeah, you definitely need to spend some more time. I actually have a really good time answering the questions. Like I don't mind going for 15 more minutes unless
Yeah.
you also need to,
No,
be.
that sounds good. That sounds good. It's only 7 p.m. here. I still have 96 people here, so you guys are champs. It's been an hour and a half,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we're still
thank you all.
going strong. Um, so I know we talked about data engineers, but I think it's so important for data scientists to work well with data engineers, right? Build the relationship, kind of build that efficiency in terms of how you interact with data engineers. What tactics do you use to make sure that your engagement with data engineers is seamless and almost efficient?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think so from my experience working with data engineers, like what helps is actually kind of showing what their data output is doing in a sense. So I've shown them my code before and show like what this model is doing like on a high level. It actually helps them like instead of me being like, oh, I need like this column, this column, this column, like that's just like whatever, right? Like there's no relationship there. But rather kind of explain a little bit. So just to give a bit of context, like this was a data engineer working on kind of like a new stream, like a new
Mhm.
ETL specifically for this project. So it did help, right? But if they were working on some very general purpose, like oh, like they literally don't know where this ETL is going, then I guess that's slightly less possible. But just for me, with the data engineering that was working on my the project that I was working on, it did help to try to explain that and actually include them in a lot of the like touch points as well. Like when they were able to join, like we had them invited to the touch points.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. I feel like transparency is like the number one thing. Like I try to keep them, even if like they not needed in a meeting, but it's rolling around model development, model tuning. I'll just invite them. So even if they're a
Hmm.
fly on the wall, it gives them so much context that they usually really appreciate. Like subtle things like that really matter.
Yeah.
Um, and also when I think about feature engineering, I try to keep them in mind, right? Because even if I'm not productionalizing it, one of the engineers might. So I like to keep them in mind. So I'm not coming up with ridiculous things that sure work well in Python, but if you convert it to Scala or PySpark, it's like an absolute hellhole.
Mhm.
Understanding how things scale and keeping that in mind when you're hypothesizing really goes a long way in terms of working with your engineers.
Yeah,
Um,
that's actually a really, really good point.
yeah, people don't think about that, right? Like, how, will my suggestion scale? Because like, yeah, I've seen like data scientists come up with like insanely convoluted like solutions that sure have great performance, but the second you go to deployment, they're like, yeah, we can't do any of this. Like, this is useless.
I see. I see.
I've seen like that people run into roadblocks because of that.
I see. Maybe one day I haven't happened to. I think it's because for me, I also, I guess instinctively, because I did come from like, let's say game programming. So then I kind of like I go for more simple, deployment. Like, as in, like, it still has to be useful. And if it needs to be slightly complicated, yes. But I think my instinct just like, it's like, no, 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 stop. Even though I'm not the one doing it, I guess. So
Totally.
yeah, that was an interesting instinct that I built.
That's
But yeah.
good. That's really good. Um, okay. In my role, there are no live projects. I work on POCs. Do people accept me when I try to switch job? How do I get domain knowledge?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to kind of hmm. I think POCs are great in terms of work experience. However, I think as you get to more senior levels, like once you're like literally a year in and you want like if you're trying to find some other role like literally a year or two in, I think it helps, right? I'm not saying it's impossible, like it's not a hard kind of requirement. But I do find that for like anything that's like slightly more senior, then like production is most welcome. But if you don't happen to have that at work, like you just kind of do something ad hoc and you hand it off, or you just kind of have it there, like either try to first automate something, like you can schedule something on a daily cadence yourself, right? Like you can write a cron job or something just on your little
Oh,
computer and your little server or something that they gave you. And just try to either show it by automating something, or two, by I guess what I suggested before is like you making a side project with like a web app, which does help a bit with that too.
yeah. All great suggestions. Matthew had a follow up that I want to dive into a bit because I think everyone will get something out of it. And that's when, can you give an example when you suggested something that didn't scale for deployment or what the hangup was? So let me just spend a second talking about this because I think it's like definitely something worth explaining. So we had this data scientist, and luckily this wasn't me, but we had this data scientist that kind of hypothesized this real-time solution, right? And we were supposed to use streaming data. And this was like, his whole thing was fixated around a real-time solution, training a model hourly to output results real time to help kind of gauge and change a user experience, right? It was really convoluted, but a really interesting problem statement.
Hmm.
But like I think our data set, I think, is about our engagement data set. I think if I remember, it's about like 150 gigs that he was trying to process on like what was it in like a real time level. He's trying to really aggregate that data almost real time. And the second we went to the engineers, and he did all this work without even talking to the engineers. And the second he got there,
Hmm.
it was just a laundry list. I think you said sounds expensive. That's just one thing, right? Like sure we're Disney, sure you might think unlimited budget, but it doesn't work that way. You can't spend like $10,000-$20,000 a month to try to train and retrain your model, right? Just like that's not suitable. And also there was just not, it was almost impossible for them to even write code to do what he was trying to do, right? And that's where I think transparency comes into play because if you just sit in your silo, put your head down and build this solution without actually talking to the engineering team and even giving them a heads up, you run into these type of problems because you go and spend hours and hours developing the solution that like isn't even remotely feasible to implement. That's a little long-winded, but like it was just this some it's that's like a case study we use over and over again to highlight why data engineers should be in the loop, because
Mm-hmm.
it was like data scientists aren't cheap, right? Sure, we're salaried, but like imagine spending 3 weeks on a solution just dedicated to that solution and literally none of it's usable because
Mm-hmm.
he had this constraint that this is only useful when it's in real time and really not useful in a batch job or a daily job. It was like 3 weeks worth of work that was just thrown in the trash.
Wow, I don't have an example to beat that. Like that's a really good example. Um,
It was crazy. Yeah, it was really bizarre. Yeah, it was like I said, like we always talk about it, like every meeting that's like a case study that comes up over and over. Like he's not with us anymore, so we're not like shitting on him
mhm.
in every meeting. But yeah,
Yeah, I see. Yeah, no, that's a great example. I don't have anything to really like add to that.
this is a good question that I can't talk to, so this is probably best for you. And that's, how do data scientists work together? Like when you're working on a data science project, how do you delegate tasks between data scientists?
Ooh, let me think about this real quick because I think right now as my role, I'm slightly so I mentioned like right now in my role I do a lot of kind of like design, technical, kind of technical like design and like kind of almost like systems design in a sense, and then that starts off as solo, but then eventually more people get added onto the team. But I think I have a better example of my previous role, which is like this is kind of funny. Well, not funny. I don't know. There was like this project, and then it was the actually one of the projects I joined, and there was a kind of a technical lead on it, but then he actually had left the company, so I basically had to take over as the technical lead, and we had two other people join that team. So we started off as I had basically taken over like what that I guess lead had left in terms of source code, and then I had added a big portion of source code because I had been working with him. So what we were doing is that like we each took apart um one part, not took apart, but
Mhm.
one part of the source code, and we had pretty clear definitions and of like what we were working on at that time, because this was at the very early stages of the project. It was almost like an MVP. We weren't like changing each other's lines of code at the moment, but we actually got together I think like once a day or something just to um, keep everyone in the loop. And
Mhm.
of course we were using version control, so I could like just literally see what he had, but just like also to go through the rationale of that. And then as more people joined, like I found we had each person work on a different aspect of it. So I think our style was more like division of the project, and then it all comes together and we all keep each other in the loop. Like if I change something slightly upstream, it was all like within data science, so I guess when I say upstream it wasn't like a big
Mhm.
deal. But like maybe a little bit of a deal, but like not as massive as like the whole data engineering type of situation.
Totally.
Yeah, but I think we had really good communication in the in terms of just like keeping each other in the loop, and like me kind of onboarding the logic and passing off like a kind of like a POC version of it that was to be refactored and retrained and then put into production while I was working on like my main thing that I eventually put into production altogether. So I think okay, just to answer, just like to quickly summarize the question, it's just like a lot of communication and good division of work. I don't know if maybe you have worked with teams that like you were literally working on like the exact same thing, like exactly like you're changing each other's lines of codes like on a daily basis. Like, did
No.
that happen so much or?
No, I think kind of similar to you, we would break down because you try to do functional programming, right? Even in data science. So we would just break down any large project into functions and then
Hmm.
just assign the functions to folks. Um,
Okay, yeah.
I, I've never been a fan of pair programming of like working on the same code. I, I'm just not a fan of it. I don't agree with it. So I try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, we didn't do that either. Like I guess like yeah, we didn't do that. We didn't do that at all. So
Nice.
yeah.
There's some questions for you that I want to make sure we get to.
Okay.
So how do you approach an ML problem? Do you start with stats or do you directly try to jump into deep learning models? Are you really just focused on insights to provide that you provide to business? What's your thought process?
Ooh, this is a very kind of it depends, but let me mention my my thought process. So I guess in my role, I rarely do the kind of like I guess like the last the last part, which is like I guess what a data analyst
Mhm,
at our company would do. So then I do less of that kind of business decision like analytics type of thing. However, let's say I'm starting an ML project, it kind of depends on how much data we have for that in particular and like where it is and is it like in production in a good place for it to connect to where data science production is, or is it like literally sitting somewhere very far away so to speak, or like in a okay, so it depends on how much data we have. Do we have that data reliably? That's actually my first thing. Um, Second step is to kind of like play around with that data. And this is assuming like the whole business case is there. Like, is it useful or something, right?
mhm,
But let's assume that is already the case. So let's say the project is approved and everything. I will probably explore the data and see what can be used as like features, and then just like actually that takes a decent amount of time, like a decent amount of time I would say, before I kind of figure out what kind of data is really suitable. For some cases it's more straightforward, right? Like let's say it's a website recommender system, then of course something would have to do with like their behavior on the website, right? That's more straightforward. um,
mhm,
for I guess like more kind of different open-ended questions, it might be there might be more time that's needed to do exploring. So kind of see if that data's there, traits of the data. Uh, Using that, like using knowledge of models is kind of important. I don't jump into deep learning. The reason being that I find that for more like customer facing or because we had for both of my projects, like there were real humans engaged in those. So then it was less like trying to produce like gibberish. Like we wanted to kind of avoid that. So it was more like being able to use some knowledge of algorithms to see like what might be suitable and doing a lot of research at that point before kind of like jumping in and like training something. um yeah, I guess that's my thought process like for ML project, like if we are not even discussing like the whole like production part, because
yeah.
yeah, we were unable to have time to do that.
That was well said. Damien asks, this is pretty general, but how do you like working at Clearbank? What do you like? What's your experience like there?
Oh, I really like it. So what really drew me to this company, so just to quickly give an overview, is that it uses machine learning to help to make kind of funding or investing decisions in for especially e-commerce businesses. So I've been able to see, even when I was interviewing, I've heard of companies that were funded by Clearbank. And as someone who has founded a kind of like a small sized video game studio, it really related to me, right? Like, oh, if I need funding, but it's very difficult for me to, let's say, fly to San Fran and like pitch VCs, or try to get banking loans, but then they don't accept like my kind of payments or like online products or that kind of business credit or something. Like it's pretty difficult actually for
Mhm,
a lot of e-commerce or um, like online specific companies to get that kind of flexible non-equity funding. So I was able to see like these products firsthand, and they share a lot of these stories, and I found that really impactful. Like compared to, okay, this is just like comparing to telecom, where there were real users that would interact with like, let's say, outputs of what my ML was saying, but then they're kind of just like users to me. Like they're just like someone with a phone plan to me. Like, right? It was just like, yeah, they're people, but I also didn't really like see them, so I don't know who
mhm,
they are. For Clearbank, it's like it could be like this e-commerce company that like made 1 million a month like after they took our funding and they grew like, and then we have like this discounts code like spreadsheet. It's like the people that the businesses that we have funded, like they would like share a lot of stories and like how great it was to work with us, and just like see the real product there is just
that's really
like
cool.
very very interesting to me.
Nice, very cool. Okay, let's ask or answer a couple more questions, just two
Hmm.
more, and
Sounds
then
good to me.
I know it's 10:16 already.
That's all good. I'm
Um,
having a really good time. So
yeah, these are like they're fun, right? It's like very casual and like kind of cool to have a pulse of like what people are worried about or thinking about.
exactly.
Yeah, like I said, I think I enjoy these just as much as it seems like the attendees do. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so Tiffany asks, what are your thoughts on data viz skills, Tableau, Amplitude, etc.?
Ooh, I guess for me, I personally haven't had to use them like much. Okay. I don't know if this is different for you.
Same here.
Yeah, I
Uh,
barely had to use Tableau or Power BI or what other things we had. Like if I needed to put a presentation together of like let's say model metrics, like I just like toss in an Excel like and then I just like put the
exactly.
yeah, so that's me because our PM would probably make most of the slides, and then she'd like ask me for something, and I'd be like, "Here it is." So then copy from Excel to their PowerPoint. I mean, this is my experience, and because
Same here.
our company happens to definitely like separate data scientists like more solidly from data analysts. I know there's companies where it's kind of like
Of course. Yeah.
yeah, like all together, but for me and I guess for you as well.
Yeah, I feel like for presentations, I've gotten pretty comfortable making really aesthetic matplotlib plots. I know it's like blasphemy for some people,
Hmm.
but
No, I get that too.
so like what I'll just do, because I'm not building the decks usually,
Hmm.
sometimes I do. I'll put the charts that we'll need, and then someone will put the deck together. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I rarely use Tableau. I probably should know a little bit, but whatever, it's fine.
Nah. No, yeah. And what I mentioned was at my previous role, because like actually at my current role at Clearbank, we don't really do that whole like presentation thing. So I'll keep the Matplotlib stuff in basically like Jupyter or something. And
Mhm.
I will oh actually I might copy them onto Google Docs. Like that's the most that I will do. I'll just like dump them in I'll dump the plot into a PNG and then do that. But I guess like for before when the PM was making like PPT, right? So then I just like tossed it in Excel so they won't
And
bother
just
me to
yeah,
change
exactly.
it again. So yeah, it definitely differs on like where the kind of viz is going. But I know, yeah, some people make dashboards and stuff, but it just didn't wasn't my role.
Yeah, definitely. And let's last question. What about Spark? Do I have to learn Spark before getting my first job?
Ooh, I mean, I happened to work with PySpark before, but that was more like knowing Python slash a little bit of how Spark works, but I wouldn't say that I've worked with it like in terms of the other types of APIs that Spark provides per se. So I don't really know. I
So
did happen to work with it, but yeah.
I think every like hiring manager is very different, but for me, like it's a massive nice to have. Like I know like my eyes light up a bit if I see that they have some experience with Spark. And that doesn't mean that they're building pipelines in Spark. Like I don't need that. But if they're able to prototype a bit and like experiment with Spark, that's a huge plus to me. Just because I mean, you and I were working with massive data sets, right? Like
Mhm.
millions and millions of users, engagement data, so that's even more granular. Like you need to have people who can analyze that data well, right? I can't spin up a massive cluster so that they're working on Python and exploring that data. It's not economical.
Yeah, that's one thing I did realize, and I guess I'm curious what you think about this because when I was working with PySpark specifically, I was like, this is difficult for me to emulate at home, I guess, because there was like so much infrastructure. There was infrastructure that went into me being able to use that at work. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering what you think of if someone wanted to do that. Like, let's say they did want a little bit of scale. Like, I guess you can try to use like Spark on like tiny data set if you really wanted to, right? But just like, what would you think for someone who didn't have that kind of infrastructure available?
So what I would do is probably just spin up an EMR cluster. So that's in the AWS suite.
I see.
EMR is like has a notebook configuration, but it runs on distributed nodes or distributed clusters. And you can easily just spin up a PySpark notebook on there. So it's a really easy way to just start playing with EMR in a very prototypical way.
I
Um,
see.
yeah. EMR is great. I personally, like when I first got to data science, I got so lucky where they were just using Databricks,
Mhm.
and that, like Harrison, you mentioned EMR as a godsend. And once you work with Databricks, your mind is just going to be blown because it is the best platform to work in. Like it's like a Google Doc, but notebooks for coding. Like me and my three colleagues were like working in the same notebook, coding our own functions in the same notebook at the same time. And then at the end of the day, we just ran it all, and all of our codes just ran together
Nice.
seamlessly. Yeah, it's so cool.
That's really awesome. I'll definitely keep that in mind. I haven't
Yeah.
had the chance to work with that yet, but yeah.
Exactly, right? Like EMR is also cool. Like within the same notebook, you'd be working R, PySpark, Python, SQL, all in the same notebook, and it runs like a charm.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah,
SQL
I feel
and
like I don't.
Python
I
are.
feel like I'm like an advocate for Databricks, but I promise I'm not. Yeah, it's really cool. I feel like absolutely love it. Um, let's see. You want to do one more question?
All right, let's go. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right, let's see. Let me find a good one. Oh, this is a good one. What kind of ethical problems have you had to face as a data scientist?
Oh, this is such a good question. I think for me, didn't happen to the reason being that like there's not I didn't work on, let's say, a video platform like YouTube. Like I guess the worst like my model do would do is like suggest you like a phone you don't want, I guess. Like, like there wasn't really too much harm in that, but because a lot of people in the like aggregate intellect, which is like the kind of like online streaming um like it's on YouTube, and we find speakers and researchers. There is a kind of small group of people, or I think one or two people, they're dedicated to speaking, like hosting talks from ML ethics research. So I've learned a lot from them, but yeah, I guess in my personal work I haven't encountered that so much because of the nature of the product. So I guess like as much as I would like to comment on that, I don't have a personal example.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of rare, and I have encountered it. So I was in consulting, and we were doing data science consulting for the pharma industry. So
Mhm.
naturally, there's a lot of gray area with people in pharma, like just the way they are. But there were some times in consulting where you had these partners that really push the boundaries of what the model can really do when they're trying to sell.
Ah,
Um, and definitely some uncomfortable scenes where, yeah, like I can't talk about too much. I obviously I'm
mhm.
not going to say anything, but yeah, you just have, yeah, like I said, just pushing what the model actually does to sell a project.
Mhm.
It's not great. But I've seen that happen quite a bit just because sure you're a data scientist, but you're a consultant first and foremost. So selling a project and selling is like your number one priority, which doesn't go hand in hand with data science.
I
Um,
see. I see.
yeah, just kind of the reason why I left. Cool, but I think with that 7:30 already, I still have actual work to get done tonight.
Mhm, mhm.
So I think we'll wrap up. I've saved all of these questions, and if I didn't get to any of these questions, or we didn't get to any of these questions, I'll try to answer them over the next week or so. It's kind of just hard to get through 80 questions within an hour, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Susan, thank you for joining us. I hope you had fun. I hope
Yeah, I
yeah,
did.
you
I
can
did.
love answering all these questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for hosting. Like this was a lot of fun, and thank you everyone for joining. Like I know how difficult it is, or sometimes how opaque it is to, just get someone to chat and just like understand a little bit more, and hopefully this was like in any way helpful.
For sure. And again, guys, you have both of our LinkedIns. I think before we go, I'll just paste that same thing once more, just so you have all the resources. Um, I think probably like Susan, we try to make ourselves very accessible through LinkedIn. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out, send us a message, whatever. Like we want to help out in any way possible. And because this is still pretty new and this whole thing is in its infancy, if you guys have any feedback, let me know, right? If you think the structure could be different, let me know. Any feedback is absolutely welcome, right? So definitely let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next session, probably a month from now.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank
Cool.
you so
See ya,
much for having me.
Susan.
Bye.
Bye.